Alright, welcome to our fourth and final video. So at this point we've gone over the design of our game, we've talked about making the very most basic minimal kind of game, and then we added one feature to that. And at this point in time, you're expected to sort of move on to your own, go to your game and start implementing your own features and your own elements of your design. I want to leave you with a few more ideas, but I'm not going to go into a whole lot more detail on how my game is designed and developed. But I want to give you some more ideas and some more tools that can help you out. So one of these is a feature of Thonny. As you start developing a bigger game, a bigger project, you might want to use this outline option. When you enable this, you will have an outline over here that allows you to see all the methods that you have defined. And you see I've got various methods defined for all of my different classes. And I can double click them to jump directly to my different methods. You see that I've done a lot of methods, helper methods, to sort of break up my code. And this has led to various nice things in terms of organizing my code. So for instance, I have encounters in my game. And when you enter an encounter, the menu system changes a little bit. So I have the encounter variable. When we're in an encounter, there's a different render call versus when we're in the overworld, the main world map that we can move around in. And that leads to two different render sort of paths that we go down. And you've seen the render before. We had our render location and various calls to other render methods that could do various interesting things. And I've made modifications to it as the design of my game evolved. So that's one idea, is using the outline view and continuing to structure your code in an intelligent way, delegating responsibility to helper functions. This applies in a similar way to your classes. I have my player class has a method called nap. The nap function for the player class is responsible for calling the nap method of all of its animals. Now, the nap method for the animal is very straightforward. It just assigns the energy back to 5 for the animal. And I could have done that work directly in the list of animals via the nap method of the player. But I didn't. I reserved that job to be part of the animal's work. This is good, clean code design. This is the kind of thing that will reflect very favorably when we evaluate your code. And the reason for that is it simplifies your code. It keeps it more clean and more organized. Yes, it makes it longer, but length of code is not always the only metric for complexity. So don't be afraid to make helper functions and delegate responsibility up and down your classes. So one other idea in here I want to talk about is a useful thing called the repr. So repr is another special Python function. You see it's got the double underscores, underscore underscore reper underscore underscore, just like the init function. Repr stands for representation. When you try and print your class, when I try and print a world, it looks very ugly. It would be very nice if we had ways of representing the world in a cleaner style. And the repr is what can do that for us. So when you define a repr, whenever you call that repr, whenever you try and print the world instance, it will convert it to a string. So let me run my code. And when you have a repr enabled, which I do now that I've turned it on, I can print my world in a more interesting way. If instead of the code I have here, I was just printing out a world object, I could do that. And I could put some parentheses around it or something. And now, when I print out the world, it prints out a world object. Print the world. We get it in that special font. Another useful idea is the idea of using the vars function. So this is another built-in thing called vars. If you call vars on an object, then it prints out all of its attributes. So what I've done here is I'm using this expression, string var self, inside of my repr. And when I call that, it dumps the data inside of my world at the current moment. You can feel free to take this this function I've got here, this method, and use it in your own game. Give it a documentation, give it a doc string that explains what it does. And when you do this, you'll be able to, at any time, print out your world and get a sense of what its data is. This will come in really handy when you're writing a bunch of asserts. You can print along the way and be like, what does my initial world look like? So when I do that, I can see, at the start of the game, I'm playing, the time is 0, I have no encounters, my player field has this location, and that player character has catnip. So you'll notice I have repr functions implemented for my world, and my player, and my animal class. All of them get their own repr, all with the exact same method body, and this allows me to get this nice nested description of my world. This is for your convenience. You don't have to do it. You could have it produce something else. I like to do it just when I'm debugging. It can help me figure things out. So that's most of what I wanted to talk about. Good, clean code design, using the repr, using the outline. I think the only other thing I might mention is thinking very strategically about your use of if statements, about using patterns like here where I initialize an empty list or an empty string, repeatedly append or add to it, and then return that value. Be very sensitive to your use of if statements. If versus elif makes a big difference. And that's not as true when you're doing the return style. So here I've got a set of mutually exclusive if statements because each one's returning. If you are not returning, if you're appending or adding, then these will all happen. Like it tests this one and then it tests this one. If you want them to be mutually exclusive, you put an elif in front of them, and then they will not happen unless the first one fails. So this is just something, if you don't understand what I mean, you should seek out some more help on it. You should go review the lessons about if statements and elifs and understand how the return keyword interrupts the flow of functions. So this was back in week 11 that we were learning all this stuff. Sorry, week 10 that we were learning all this stuff. Besides that, this is most of what I wanted to cover in this video. I just wanted to try and show you some more advanced code. To give you a sense of how this game turned out, you can play it yourself on the website, but you can see that I've written about 400 something lines of code, and I haven't unit tested it a whole lot. I really have not written very extensive unit tests, and I haven't written documentation. So that should give you some perspective on how much code I'm expecting. 400 lines of code is not enough. I clearly have to write more for the documentation. I wouldn't be surprised if I could easily double the amount of code I have here. If you document as you go and you unit test incrementally, you will find that this goes much more smoothly. I hope that you have the best of luck with your game, and I look forward to playing them. Have a great day.